Welcome to Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, thanks for watching. Well, later in the show, we're going to talk about child abuse. Angela Liddle, she's with the Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance, is here. We'll bring you up to date on what's going on to combat that. But first, what would Pennsylvania Newsmakers be like before an election if we didn't talk about elections and politics? We'll take that up after these words.
This is Pennsylvania Newsmakers, a fast-paced, unrehearsed weekly discussion with and about the leaders who shape your world. And now, here's your host, Terry Madonna.
Welcome back to the program. Well, sitting across from me is Mike Straub. He covers the Capitol for WGAL-TV. And Karen Langley, she's been on the program many times. She's with the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. I must tell both of you, we have 3 elections other than obviously president and vice president on the ballot and the U.S. Senate race, one of the hotly contested Senate races in the country. We have elections for Attorney General, and I'm going to gulp a little bit, State Treasurer, and Auditor General, and I have to look myself to make sure I know who all these candidates are. Karen, what's that about?
And I think that's the struggle for these candidates. They are running for statewide offices, pretty important, but you know it's dwarfed by any presidential election, particularly this one. I would think the Attorney General candidates might have a little bit better of chance getting attention. You know that's a office people have probably heard of anyway.
You mean because of Kathleen Kane,
well,
if nobody else?
Especially within this last year, there's been so much attention to it. But you know, you have to feel for the candidates for Treasurer and Auditor General, trying to get people to pay attention to them this year.
That's a great point. I mean, look, these are not just important for what they do, Mike, but these are the training grounds for what? To run for governor and to run for senator, right? I mean, to run for the 2 very important offices. Go ahead.
Well, you talk about the Attorney General's office as one that's been surrounded by this corruption and criminal charges. The Treasurer's office, last treasurer who was elected, it was facing federal charges and Rob McCord. So now that office will finally be elected by the people again for the first time since then. And you're right, there's no commercials by these candidates. They're kind of hiding. It's Otto Voigt of the Republicans, who's made himself a mainstay on the Trump-Pence circuit around the state. And then a guy named Joe Torsella, who was a former Rendell staffer, a guy who's worked at the United Nations, so very different backgrounds.
Head of the Constitution
Center. Head of the Constitution Center in Philadelphia. And I mean, they oversee $100 billion for all of us and serve on every state board. So that's a race that should probably be getting more attention.
And as you accurately point out, Rob McCord, waiting to be sentenced. I mean, he was tried and convicted, one count, something like 18 years ago. I'm having fun with it. I shouldn't do that, perhaps, but, a couple of years ago. But he was wearing a wire, I take it. He's helping out the investigators. Now, you've been particularly looking at which you told me, which one of the races have you been
I'm going to report a story in the Auditor General's race where we have the incumbent Auditor General, Eugene DePasquale, a Democrat seeking a second term, and then a Republican, John Brown, a county executive from the northeastern part of the state, trying to unseat him. And Eugene
has been, we're not picking sides here, but not arguably, he's been pretty high profile with all the audits. You've talked about him on TV and you've written about him, right?
Yes, he's released, reports that are on topics that are pretty headline worthy, that are eye-catching, on topics like phone calls going unanswered to a child abuse hotline, on topics like untested rape kits. So it is possible that some readers are going to remember his name.
Yeah, you would think an incumbent. I've not seen a single press release. Maybe he's had them, and from John Brown, I've not seen a story. Have you done any stories at the station on him? Not yet.
No, not any stories on John Brown specifically. I know he's a former mayor of Bangor, Pennsylvania, Northampton County executive, touts some cost-cutting measures there.
Right.
But you're right, you're up against an incumbent who has a pretty well-oiled PR machine. Of his audits come out regularly, and as Karen said, they're in the headlines. We often joke, what is Eugene's ultimate goal? Because the way he's able to put himself in the news, he's run his own campaign by just being a busy Auditor General.
Would it shock you if he runs for governor?
It wouldn't shock me if anybody who is a high-profile public official wants to try that.
Yeah, that's right. So all in all, they don't have enough money to get on TV.
I think that Eugene may be planning to go up, although I don't believe that he has yet.
But he's not up now.
I don't believe so.
And so here we are, as this show airs, will be just a tad more than 2 weeks to go. And then the real problem is, how do you break through the omnipresent television commercials for President and United States Senate, right?
I don't know.
Yeah, we're all looking. The buys you're going to have to make are, you can't put 2 commercials on a day, can you? Yeah, that's your area.
And you've done, we both, if you do any stories with the voters, when you try to get out there into the minds of the voters, you're dealing with a huge percentage of the electorate, so to speak, who is just sick of hearing it.
Yeah,
they've probably made their decisions by now. Whatever comes out about Trump, whatever comes out about Pat Toomey or Katie McGinty, most folks you meet, who I'm meeting day to day, are going, I don't want to talk anything about that anymore. I wish I should have just voted absentee and been done with all this, because you have a huge number of people this time around who are tired.
You know what? Maybe one of the things, and I know, it's hard to figure out when you want to put these elections on the ballot. The reason you have these 3 offices, Auditor General, Treasurer, and Attorney General, is you don't want them running in the same cycle as the governor. You want to keep them distinct. So the governor runs in a different election year than those 3. Because to some extent, they're also watchdogs, right, on what happens in the administration. So you want to separate them. But then you put them in the presidential election cycle and the U.S. Senate, and they get drowned out for that reason. So there's not a good option, right?
You wonder if it would almost be better to put them with the judges and the municipal officials in the odd-numbered years.
Yeah. Of course, the turnout there tends to be low, but at least the focus would be there, right?
Yeah.
All right, when we come back, we're going to take a break. Believe it or not, the Pennsylvania legislature is in session. They're both going to smile because they cover the legislature. They're doing a couple of things that are worth reporting on, and we'll do that in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Pennsylvania Chamber of Business and Industry, now celebrating 100 years as the statewide voice of business, and by the Pennsylvania State Education Association and Partners for Public Education, bringing the power of a great education to our schools, our students, and our communities. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Highway Information Association, the go-to source to learn about transportation projects and issues. Please visit pahighwayinfo.org. And by the Pennsylvania Manufacturers Association. Business in Pennsylvania is our business.
Karen Langley and Mike Straub, they're reporters. They cover the state capitol for their respective news organizations. In the case of Karen, for the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette, and for Mike Straub, WGAL, otherwise known as News 8. Do I got that right?
Yeah.
News 8, there we go. All right, Karen, sanctuary cities, it's controversial. Talk about what happened with the first sanctuary city bill, meaning that if you had not a bill. If you had a policy where you didn't cooperate with the federal government in terms of dealing with immigration, you would maybe lose money, go ahead, talk about that a bit.
Yeah, this is a proposal that passed the House this week that would penalize municipalities that in various ways refuse to cooperate with federal immigration officials. It could put them at risk of, as you say, losing state funding, although the details of how that would work out are not very clear.
Wow.
It also says the municipalities could be liable under certain conditions if a undocumented immigrant commits a crime or injures somebody in one of those sanctuary municipalities. Philadelphia is the high-profile example of a city with this policy.
Philly is the. Go ahead.
Although there are counties that have different ways of dealing with requests from immigration officials, and so, like the County Commissioners Association, for example, opposes this bill, saying that it would put a burden on the counties.
They haven't taken a position on the issue itself. They just don't want the burden to be
not on
put.
the immigration issue itself.
Well, okay, so you got a sanctuary city Philly's in the news virtually every day. It's a big part. It's come up in presidential and Senate campaigns in our state. You know, it's been an issue between Senator Toomey, who's against it, and I guess Katie McGinty, the Democratic candidate, who wrote a letter to the mayor of Philly, saying what? Saying, rethink the policy, but then she opposes the federal legislation that would do, not the same thing particularly, but penalize a city if they carried out the policy, right?
No, you're exactly right. Toomey has tried to make this a major issue, maybe not a major issue, but he's tried to make this an issue worth talking about throughout this campaign. And McGinty has, as she said, urged Philadelphia to address their policy and be more, in line with requests from the federal government. But you're right, she opposes the legislation at the federal level. And it was interesting watching the floor debate of the bill this week in the House, is that they were really trying to make that point that as much as this is a bill targeted at Philadelphia, it could have much larger implications on counties and smaller townships even that might
where
have
it's
something
not as big a problem,
right? But it could still
right?
open them up to lawsuits. And there was an example, I believe it was somewhere in Lehigh County, of a guy who was held for 3 or 4 days because they thought he might be an illegal immigrant, and here he is. I'm saying I was born in New Jersey. He's the same ID as everybody else, but he'd been held for a few days, and he sued that police force in that town and made a bunch of money.
Sharon's shaking her head.
This was an interesting debate that came up then.
So that's a concern. Is that one of the concerns that the county commissioners have? I would think. That they get sued, for, and I would think that would be. Now, as Governor Wolf indicated, I haven't seen. Has he said anything about this?
I am not sure.
I didn't see any press statements out of Governor Wolf's office about it. I know on the issue we're going to segue to on guns, I think he has indicated a position on it. So who wants to start out with the guns? Who wants to explain what's going on with, can a municipality pass an ordinance which expands the control of firearms beyond state law? Do I got that right? Go ahead.
Yeah, well, what this bill would do is make it easier for organizations and people to sue over local firearm restrictions that exceed those that are at the state level. So, it says, for instance, that someone who is eligible to own a gun and is a Pennsylvania resident could file a lawsuit contesting one of these things, even if they would not previously have standing under current law. And it even goes further to say that membership organizations that have, such a Pennsylvania gun enthusiast in them, like the NRA, would be able to file lawsuits.
I'll give you the final word on this. So let's give us an example. You have a municipality that passes an ordinance that says, if you learn that your gun is missing or stolen, when you have a certain amount of time to report that, or, then you may face penalties of your own. That's an example of just the thing that Karen's talking about, correct?
Yeah, the city of Lancaster had that ordinance, and if it sounds like a broken record, this law was already passed and signed by Tom Corbett. It got shot down in a court because they followed it they attached it to a bill that didn't have to do anything with guns. So that's what got it removed.
You can't have two subjects in a bill that passes the legislature, signed by the governor, two subjects. That gets thrown out. You're supposed to have one subject. I won't go into how many times that's probably been violated. Both these journalists are smiling as we talk about that, but go ahead.
But so they had to reintroduce the bill again so it could be its own separate bill, and that's why it sounds like you're sitting there saying, I've heard of this bill before. It's happened before, but you're exactly right. City of Lancaster, for example, had that. They were sued by the NRA because of that, because it exceeded state law. And some municipalities
had them and then dropped them because they don't want to get separate ordinances. They don't want to get in a legal battle and have to pay all that money, right?
Yeah, and I think that one of the groups that advocates for restrictions on guns was keeping track of those cases.
All right, we're going to follow that. We'll see what happens. Somehow, I'm not sure that a governor named Tom Wolf is likely to sign that. We'll see where that all goes. Thanks for coming in. All right, coming up, we'll give you an update on what's going on with child abuse legislation, and we'll catch up with that, and we'll do that after these words.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Credit Union Association. Pennsylvania Credit Unions, where people are worth more than money. To find a credit union that is right for you, check out ibelong.org. And by the Energy Association of Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania's energy information source. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is presented by the Hospital and Health System Association of Pennsylvania, working towards a healthy Pennsylvania, and by the Pennsylvania Coal Alliance, representing companies involved in America's most affordable, reliable energy source. To learn more, visit pacoalalliance.com.
Welcome back to the program. Angela Liddle joins me. She's with the Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance. This is a very, very important topic. We've dealt with it before. Child abuse, as I understand it, 34 kids in this state died last year as a result of child abuse, and over 4,000 victims. And that's just what's reported.
Correct. Frightening.
I mean,
though not surprising.
Would it surprise you if there were more victims? They're just not reported?
Absolutely. That's always an issue. We have seen a tremendous increase in reporting since the amendments to the Child Protective Services Law, the very end of 2014 and into 2015. But we know that there are far more. And we have a lot of work to do, both on the front end of trying to prevent it, and then also helping people be able to get involved and be part of the solution.
What are the causes of it? What produces this?
Well, I think there are more factors than we could ever cover in this morning's chat.
Two or three big ones.
But obviously, you have parents that are ill-equipped, in some cases, overwhelmed. You have, of course, we know the rampant drug and alcohol addiction issue. We have poverty. We have folks that are just, by and large, struggling. And so one of the things that Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance does is provide statewide parent education and support programs to help parents be the best parents they can be. And
so, I mean, you can't rule out, just psychological misfits. I mean, people that are doing this because they've got whatever's going on in their heads that in which they need help for. Because this is wrong on every count.
You raise a great point, Terry. There is a percentage of our population who are parenting that for reasons we'll never understand will not provide a safe environment for their kids. And that's why community members, volunteers who volunteer in programs with children, and professionals who are classified as mandated reporters of child abuse, that's why it's so critically important that they really understand what our law says.
Now, there's been, every now and then, it emerges in the news, there are big stories. I mean, something happens. Recently, we had a grand jury report. We will learn more, and I'm going to let you take it away. We learned more about victims and what's going on within, finish my sentence.
The Catholic diocese. And really it extends, while they end up being in the limelight a bit right now in the media, the reality is it crosses lots of institutions. So we have parents who obviously struggle and oftentimes don't care for their children in the way they should. But we also have institutions where there's absolute institutional failure with the protection of children. What we have to remind ourselves is that institutions are comprised of people, and we have to build a tolerance that for child abuse and neglect that we just don't tolerate it in our society. We have right now 6 dioceses in the state who have handed over information to the AG's office. I'm happy to say that at least 3 of those dioceses are working with Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance to receive training
all right, we're going to run to a break. I want to continue with this discussion, and then I want to get 2 or 3 things that you think need to be done. All right, we'll be back with this topic in a moment.
This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Medical Society. Inspired physicians committed to the good health of Pennsylvanians and the advancement of the practice of medicine. And by the Pennsylvania Healthcare Association, advancing quality, improving lives. This broadcast of Pennsylvania Newsmakers is brought to you by the Pennsylvania Business Council and by the Pennsylvania Business Council Education Foundation.
All right, Angela Liddle from the Pennsylvania Family Support Alliance is here. We're bringing you an update on child abuse. Okay, so where does all this go now that we've got this grand jury report? Child abuse, diocese and the Catholic Church? Where does this go?
Well, I think it's another example that calls our attention to the need to really focus on the protection of kids above and beyond the convenience of institutions and systems. So, you know, I really applaud the bishop out in Pittsburgh who says our efforts shouldn't be adversarial. You know, the protection of kids and seeking the truth should be a joint endeavor. So we applaud any organization or facility, school, church, whatever, that really wants to protect kids. And that happens through good, solid background checks and clearances before you bring somebody on board, good training, ongoing professional development and training on child abuse recognition and reporting.
And observation of things.
And strong policies. And
remember the Penn State situation where somebody, a certain assistant observed what's happened, and you go ahead. We won't get it. We've done a lot of shows on that.
We have. So it's really about educating, but it's about holding ourselves and each other to a level of accountability.
What are you doing specifically in the Family Support Alliance?
Well, we're doing a couple of things. The one thing that I think is important for your viewers to know is that the Department of Human Services, through monies allocated by the General Assembly, has made available no-cost on-site training on what our Child Protective Services law says, how you recognize child abuse, and the proper procedures for reporting it. So if you're a mandated reporter, in likelihood, many of those folks need to have training.
Right. Is there, and there's some legislation going on with how far back you can go when there's a lawsuit involving this. You know, that's also an issue, right? Well,
there's a statute of limitations. House Bill 1947 this week, we hope, makes it to the Senate floor with, of course, we want things to be better for future victims.
And what does that say specifically?
Well, what they're trying to look at right now is that the statute of limitations, there would be an extension for victims up to age 50 to file a civil suit. Currently, that is limited to age 30. And then, of course, criminally to look at the elimination. So it'll be interesting to see what the House and the Senate come together on a compromise. The bottom line is we have to do a better job of protecting kids, and it takes everybody to get in the game and work towards that.
Yeah, we have about 40, 45 seconds left. In your estimation, is this problem getting better or is it getting worse? I know that's a tough question because a lot of it goes unreported.
I think we can't really know that for sure. What I think we can say is that the good news is it's on people's radar in a way that it has not been in the past.
Yeah, I think that's a good point because there are other programs that do this. You hear about it all the time, and well, you'll come back and keep us updated as you have been doing. All right, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you next week for another edition of Pennsylvania Newsmakers, and as always, stay well.